You have an abundance of 24 hours in a day, and there is so much that you can do with that time. And we often hear people say things like, oh, you only have 24 hours in a day. But I feel like only is really a negative way to look at it because 24 hours is a long time. I mean, could you imagine just sitting and doing something for 24 hours? So I feel like that we look at it from a point of, we have all these responsibilities. We have to go to work. If you have kids, maybe you have to pick them up, or they have extracurricular activities. Then you have hobbies, and then you have time where you want to do like social time, and then time for yourself, and then time to clean, and blah, 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 blah. Like there's so many things. And if you try to cram all that into 24 hours, it can feel like you only have 24 hours, not to mention you got to sleep. But I like to look at it differently. You get 24 hours in a day. Everybody gets the same amount of hours. And I feel like that is a lot of time to really delegate things and divide things up in a way so that you can maximize those 24 hours. So in this video, I want to dive into time management and share some things that I have used that have helped me really manage my time more effectively so that I don't feel worn out at the end of the day or at the week, or I don't feel like that I missed something or that I didn't get anything done. And by all means, I am not perfect. There are still times where I feel like I didn't manage my time effectively, but I feel like that it really just comes down to intentionality. Nobody's perfect at this. Even the people who are most successful still may have moments in their lives where they're just not managing their time effectively. So in this video, I want to look at 5 things that I have used to help manage my time more effectively. Now, if you've been here before, you may have seen the last video where I talked about organizing your life. If you did see that video, you'll probably hear some things that are similar, like chronotypes. If you didn't see that video, definitely go check out that video because I share some things on how you can start to get your life organized in a way so that it's really tailored towards you and what you need and what your life is like in this season of your life. Hey everyone, my name is Chloe. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here and if you've been here before, welcome back and thanks so much for coming back. Be sure to like and subscribe if these things resonate with you, and be sure to comment below throughout the video if you have any tips that you want to share or if something resonated with you or if you've done these things before. All right, let's dive in. The first thing is time wasters. Time wasters, I like to look at them as things like roadblocks, distractions, and internal barriers. So when we think of a roadblock, that's something that is not within your control. Like when you're driving down the street or you're on the freeway and there's a roadblock sign or like a detour sign, that's something that is not within your control. And now you have to make adjustments based on this roadblock. So sickness can be a roadblock, or a person not meeting their end of the stick. Like if you are supposed to work on a project together with someone and they didn't do their part and now you have to do their part for them, that's like wasting time. Now you have to play catch up or you have to, make adjustments. So those are roadblocks, and I think that it's important to be aware of those things and plan for them in advance. So just in case you do come up against a roadblock, you are not totally derailed. So for example of planning in advance is if you go to work and your commute is say 30 minutes, maybe leave an extra 10 minutes to accommodate for potential roadblocks. So if you live in an area where it snows a lot, or if it's like bad weather, you can accommodate for potential weather conditions where maybe the traffic is a little bit slower because of snow, or maybe there's construction on the road, or maybe there might be an accident on the freeway, just like things that can come up that you have no control over, but you can plan in advance to be able to respond to those things so that you are not totally derailed and you don't feel like that this is completely wasting your time. The other thing is distractions. So distractions are things that we don't have control over, but we can control how we respond to them. So an example of a distraction could be a cell phone notification. If you are focused on a specific task and you have your cell phone right there and a notification pops up, you get a text message from somebody or an email from somebody, if that's not something that you want to be focused on in that moment, you can identify ways to remove the distraction, whether it's flipping your phone over, putting it in a different room, turning it on silent or vibrate, or whatever it may be. Another distraction is being hot or cold. So for example, if you're working and try to focus on something, but you're uncomfortable because maybe the temperatures are too warm or it's too cold in the room and you just can't focus, that becomes a distraction. Or if you're hungry and you're trying to get this task done, but your mind is just thinking about food and maybe you start to get a headache because it's like, I need to eat something. These can be distractions. So it's good to plan for those things in advance and be aware, kind of like in the video that I talked about before, knowing yourself, being aware of what makes you distracted, being aware of what's in your environment that could potentially distract you, and then plan accordingly so that you don't feel like you're wasting time catering to these distractions. So if you know that you're going to be distracted by a cell phone notification, if somebody calls you or texts you, then remove the phone for 30 minutes or an hour, how long ever it is to take you to do this task, so that you have your 100% focus dedicated to this task and other distractions don't bother you. Even if it's outside noise, birds chirping or people getting Amazon packages or the delivery truck, and it's easy to just kind of like glance outside and start daydreaming, maybe wearing noise canceling headphones and putting on like instrumental music or something to really help you stay focused and stay in the zone so that those distractions don't deter you or don't derail you from what you're supposed to be focused on. The third one that I look at is internal barriers. So these are things where you really have full control over and they come up in your mind. So things like self-doubt or afraid, being afraid to finish this task or afraid of failing at the task or unsure if you are even qualified to do the thing, or just simply procrastination, which I'm sure everybody has struggled with. When we look at procrastination, there's some research out there that talks about how procrastination is related to poor emotional regulation. I think an example of this is a person delaying a task because they have a fear of failure. So in order to reduce the potential risk, they just procrastinate and delay the task and put it off and put it off. That's one example. Another example is if a person decides to delay a task simply because they just are not interested in it. The dictionary defines procrastination as the act of putting off or delaying something, especially something that requires immediate attention. In addition to procrastination, some other internal barriers that a person may have is maybe overbooking. So trying to cram everything into one day, into one time, just overbooking, overwhelming themselves, and then ends up wasting time in that because it's just not productive, it's not successful, it doesn't work out, and it can be something that, just starts to fall apart. Overbooking. Another one can be simply not getting enough rest. You can't show up and be the best that you can be at a task or anything if you're not getting quality rest. I think a big one that maybe a lot of people face is the inability to say no. And so with that, you find yourself dedicating yourself to obligations and kind of like overbooking, where you're just spreading yourself too thin and you're not able to fulfill all of these obligations. And then things start to fall by the wayside. And often the things that fall by the wayside are the things that are most important to you because you're trying to please everybody. So it's very important to address that internal barrier of your inability to say no. Why is it that it's so hard for you to say no? What makes it challenging for you to say yes to some things, no to other things? Like really figuring those things out. And again, kind of like what I was talking about in the previous video called Organizing Your Life, is really knowing yourself, what you like and what you don't like, and knowing when and when not to say no and when not to say yes. Poor communication can be another internal barrier. So I think similar to being unable to say no, being unable to communicate what you want and ask for what you want. So if you need something from somebody or you need to delegate a task to someone because you're not able to do certain things, or you need stuff to be done in a certain amount of time and you need other people to help you, and you're unable to communicate that, that can be a huge time waster. So those are the time wasters that I think can have a big impact on a person: roadblocks, distractions, and internal barriers. So in addition to time wasters, when thinking about time management, I want to look at multitasking. I feel like multitasking is another big one, because is multitasking a bad thing or is it a good thing? I think that it depends on how we're looking at multitasking. I think multitasking can be good if, for example, you are studying at a university, you're listening to the lecture talk or your professor talk, and then you're taking notes simultaneously. So technically, you are multitasking. You're writing down what the professor is saying, but then you're also listening to them. So you're kind of doing two things at one time. But the reason why I think that this is a good form of multitasking is because those two activities are correlated with each other. So you are not completely neglecting one over the other and making your brain switch focus. The focus is kind of combined because you're writing down what you're listening to. And so I think that that's a good form of multitasking as an example. But I think a bad form of multitasking is, recently I read online, they call it switch tasking. So you're switching between two very different tasks. And it kind of like wears you out because you could be, for example, taking notes on something and then checking email notifications or checking text messages or in a conversation with somebody and then also try to do this other thing that's completely unrelated. And that can wear you out and that can waste time because you are prolonging the task. You're not giving your focus and attention 100% to this thing because your attention is now divided. And so it may take you longer to do one or the other because your brain literally can't focus 100% on two things at the same time. It'll either be dedicated to this thing or dedicated to that thing. And when you're constantly switching back and forth, it can, I've read somewhere that it can kind of lower your attention span and it's just harder for you to focus. But it also decreases like how your brain processes information. There was a study done at Stanford University that talks about this, of just how it's just not healthy for your mind. And it creates a bad experience for you and wastes your time. I know that I have been and still am sometimes guilty of multitasking. But do you multitask? Leave a comment if you also multitask or struggle with any of these things that we talked about so far. And if you have, like, what are some things that you do to combat that? I know, like, staying focused and, set aside some time dedicated to that one task, but like, what are some other things that you all might do? Because I'd be curious to know, because sometimes it can be really hard, especially when you have a lot going on. You just try to kill two birds, like the old saying, kill two birds with one stone, just try to do two things. But a lot of times that's just not effective and it's not efficient. So I want to just share a little bit more about the research done at Stanford University. And I'm just going to look over here to kind of read word for word what it says. So according to Stanford University, the brain undergoes the following process issues when multitasking in an unhealthy way. So slower processing in the brain, difficulty holding information in the working memory, difficulty retrieving information in the long-term memory, so it affects memory, unproductivity, long-term memory problems, can harm relationships. I think what that is, like, if you are in a relationship with someone, you guys are having a conversation and you are on your phone while they're talking, like, that's just disrespectful. But that's a form of multitasking. You're trying to listen, be in one place, and then be in another place. Like, I think that's one of the examples of what they mean when it can harm relationships. And the last one is increased chronic stress. So it can really stress you out because you are like overwhelming yourself. You're doing something that humans weren't designed to do. We're not a machine. We're not robots. We can't multitask in those types of unhealthy ways. So that's some research that was done by a university called Stanford. So that was multitasking. We looked at multitasking. The third thing that I want to look at under managing your time well is prioritization. So when looking at prioritization, I'm going to look at three things. And the last thing will be two different types of methods. So prioritization, it is important to create a task list so that you know what you're tackling for the day, whether it's laundry, it's cooking, it's meal prep, it's checking work emails, getting work done, whatever it may be, but having a task list of things that you need to do for that day, for that week, for that month, for the year. Like, I feel like when you're getting into months and year, that's more big picture. But the day by day, hour by hour, those are those smaller details that get you to those bigger goals. So having a task list allows you to see all the things that you need to do and which ones have the highest priority. So when you make that task list, you can look at everything and see, okay, what is the most important thing that needs to get done? And what is the least important thing that needs to get done? And even if everything is important, there are still going to be some things that are more important than others, but you'll be able to sort that out and know and see. And if not, you can always make adjustments later. But the important thing is that you can see everything laid out and make sure that you don't miss anything. The next thing under prioritization is know your rocks, pebbles, and sand. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a video on YouTube. If you just type in rocks, pebbles, sand, and prioritization or time management, it should come up. But it's basically where they take a jar and they tell you to fill this jar with rocks, pebbles, and sand. So pebbles are really, really small. Sand is tiny and rocks are huge. So rocks represent your big task that you need to get done. Pebbles represent smaller tasks and sand represents even smaller things. And so the important thing is to put the rocks in first and then put the pebbles in and then put the sand into the jar. Because if you put the sand in the jar and you fill up the jar, there's no room for the pebbles, there's no room for the rocks. And in addition, if you put the pebbles in first, there might be some room for the sand, but there is no room for the rocks. So you have to put the big things in first. So what is the most important thing, or the thing that is not necessarily always most important, but like maybe the highest priority or that carries the most weight or the highest stakes in that moment or in that season. So putting those things in first, and then putting in the pebbles, which are secondary, and then the sand, which is last. So being able to identify what your rocks are, what your pebbles are, what your sand is, and then the jar just represents your day and how you're filling up your cup throughout the day with the things that you need to get done, the things that you need to do. So I highly recommend you checking out that video because it's pretty interesting. And then just looking at that and kind of reflecting on your own life. Okay, like what are my rocks? What is my pebble? What are my pebbles? What is my sand? The next thing under prioritization is choosing a prioritization method. So there are many different prioritization methods out there, but the two that I'm going to focus on in this video is Eat the Frog and the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. If you've never heard of Eat the Frog, that was developed by Mark Twain. The idea behind Eat the Frog is to do the most complex, biggest task first. Just get it out the way. If you can do it first thing in the morning, get it out the way. For some people, Eat the Frog might be exercising. If exercising is not your thing, but it is something that you are trying to get consistent at, and you just find yourself dreading it because I'm speaking to this is me. I just do not like exercise. I like to dance, but time for that is not always there. But sometimes I just don't feel like exercising. But I think exercise is probably something that most people can relate to, of like you just don't feel like doing it, or you're just too tired and don't have the motivation. Eat the frog. Exercise at the very beginning of the day. Get it out the way. This is something that I have done before and need to get back doing. I would wake up in the morning. For me, 6 a.m. was the time that worked for me. And I would wake up probably more so around 5:45 so that I can start exercising around 6. And I was usually done probably around like 6:45, 7-ish, and I could take a shower. But it just felt so good to get the biggest thing on my list out of the way. And it may not necessarily have been the most important thing on the list or the most complex thing, but for me, it was the biggest thing because it was the hardest thing to overcome. And so just eating the frog, like Mark Twain says, getting it out the way, I didn't have to worry about it come the afternoon and the evening. So by the time it was bedtime, and you know how sometimes you reflect on your day, when I look back over the day, I didn't have to think, oh, man, I didn't even get to exercise, or man, I need to start exercising. I already did it. I did it at 6 a.m. Like, I'm done. Is it a sacrifice? Absolutely 100% yes. But you will feel so much better when you eat the frog and just get that big task that's just staring you in the eye, just get it out the way and be done with it. And you don't have to think about it until the next day when you wake up. Sometimes eat the frog is not a reoccurring thing. Sometimes it's just a big task that you have to get done, and it's not something that you'll have to think about in the future. But for me, my frog was exercise, and that is something that is reoccurring. But you may have some frogs that are reoccurring, and then some that are just one thing that you just need to get it done, but it won't be something that you have to think about later. The other method is called the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. The Eisenhower Decision Matrix is also known as the Urgent Important Matrix. This method is organizing tasks into 4 quadrants, and the 4 quadrants are urgent, not urgent, important, and not important. So I'll put a graph up on the screen. When you look at this, you can see that there are some things that are important and urgent, important, not urgent, and then not important but urgent, and not important and not urgent. And the key to this is you want to figure out what tasks are do it first, which is your eat the frog, schedule it, delegate it, or delete it and just remove it completely. It's not something that you need to worry about. So going back to that task list that you made earlier, think about that, and then think about what is important, what is urgent, what is not important, what is not urgent. Some things are going to be important and urgent and they need immediate attention. Some things are going to be important but not urgent. So maybe you could do this another day or do it later. And then some things are going to be unimportant or not important but urgent. Maybe you can delegate it to someone or have someone else take care of it. And then some things are not important and not urgent at all. And at that point, why is it even on your list? So just taking some time to think about those things and then plugging in what is important, urgent, etc. with your task list. And that'll help you figure out, what you need to do and how you want to prioritize. So we looked at time wasters, multitasking, and prioritization. The 4th thing that I want to look at is time blocking. Time blocking is scheduling your calendar and figuring out blocks of time of what you want those tasks to be, or where you want those tasks to be in blocks of time. So you have a block of time for meetings, a block of time for checking emails, a block of time for doing laundry, a block of time for cooking dinner, a block of time for spending time with kids, a block of time for spending time with your spouse, a block of time for self-care, like whatever it is that you do. Have scheduling those moments. And I did mention in the other video, like scheduling time for rest. And we'll dive into chronotypes a little bit later in this video, and I touched on it in the other video. But knowing when each task is best for you to work on. I think it's important to understand that it is okay to schedule lunch in your calendar and schedule nap times in your calendar and schedule playtime in your calendar, like marginal time, where you need time to, do your hobbies or do something that makes you happy and have fun. Scheduling those times in the calendar, because what happens is if you don't schedule those things in your calendar, you will be finding yourself saying yes to things that you don't really want to say yes to, or at times you don't really want to say yes to it because you don't have anything else going on in that time. But deep down, you don't want to do the thing. For example, have you ever experienced a moment where somebody asks you to do something and you are free and available to do the thing, but you really don't want to do it? You really don't feel like doing it. And it's not necessarily because you're selfish or you just want to be mean to people. Your heart is in a different place. And I think that is because we lack to really plan out our day and schedule how we want our day to go. And so when we just have free time, if nobody asks us to do something and we have that free time, a lot of times we find ourselves doing nothing or just like scrolling on social media. And then at the end of the day, we like, well, I didn't really get anything done. But if you have that free time and somebody does come to you and ask you to do something, but you really don't want to do it, then you find yourself doing it and saying yes to things that you really don't want to say yes to, or you don't want to say yes to in those moments. Then you find yourself people pleasing and feeling like, I'm not getting the things done that I want to get done. Like, I'm so focused on everybody else. I'm not like doing what I want. But then when you are available and free, you're not filling in that time to do the things that you want to do. So I think it's important to look at, the time that you have, because 24 hours is a lot in a day. Like, that's a long time. And I feel like a lot of that time is wasted because we're not delegating the time, filling in those blocks of time in our schedule to really get the things done that we want to do. And it does take discipline and it does take intentionality, but I promise that once you start to get in the rhythm of this, it will become easier and easier. And it'll just be a part of your lifestyle. So scheduling blocks of time to do things that you want to do. And remember that it doesn't always have to be tasks. It can be scheduling a time to nap. And guess what? When somebody comes to you and you have that free time, it's not really free time because it's nap time or it's playtime. It's marginal time. So for example, if you schedule 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday between 1 and 1:45, that's when you are going to take your nap. And somebody's like, hey, are you free during this time? No, you have an appointment, and the appointment is with yourself in the bed. So little things like that, scheduling time to make time for you, to make time for other people, to make time for tasks, to make time for your responsibilities, to make time for obligations. You will feel more fulfilled and feel more like you are productive in your day. And I mentioned this in the other video, but I feel like that rest is a form of productivity. If you schedule time to take a nap or schedule time to just sit and wind down and rest, or schedule time to get your body ready for bed by doing stretches in the evening or whatever it may be, back massage with like a chair thing or something, that is productive because that is making you better, more relaxed, so that you can really show up even more and better for other things that you have going on in life. So time blocking, getting your calendar out, whether it's a physical calendar or a digital calendar, whatever works for you, and blocking off moments in your schedule so that you can make the time for the things that you want to do, the things that you need to do, the things that you have to do. And again, not neglecting the things that you want to do. So that is time blocking. The final thing that I want to look at is chronotypes. I touched on it briefly in the last video, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. And chronotypes are, when you think of things like when people say things such as, I'm a night owl or I'm a morning person, what does that actually mean? And so chronotypes kind of dives deeper into that, and they section them off into 4 different types of animals. And they just use animals as like the mascot of that type of person. So let me tell you what the 4 are. There's dolphin, bears, lion, and wolf. So I'm going to read from here. I'll just look over here. So when you look at chronotypes, it says that dolphins are people who often struggle to fall asleep and stay asleep, and they often feel tired. Bears usually get up and they go to bed when the sun sets and rises. So that's probably the majority of society, that 9 to 5 mentality. You get up when the sun gets up, you go to bed when the sun gets up. Your body just naturally gets tired when the sun is going down, and your body naturally becomes awake when the sun rises. Lions enjoy an early start to the day and an early night. So lions are people who maybe wake up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. Like, they wake up usually before the sun rises, and they're doing things that, like, they have a lot of energy in the morning. That's probably when they feel most productive. They're maybe exercising, reading, getting important tasks done. They're eating the frog at 6 a.m. So, and yeah, enough said. Wolves, on the other hand, have trouble waking up in the morning, and they would be the people who are more like a night owl, and they feel most productive at night. So when looking at chronotypes, think about your circadian rhythm. When you start to get tired naturally, and your body naturally starts to wind down and want to go to sleep. And sometimes you can feel like that in the middle of the day where you don't really want to go to bed, but you just need a nap so you can get that boost. But also consider how, when your body is ready to really wind down for real and like go to sleep for an extended period of time. In addition to that, also think about the time where you feel like you have the most energy. So from this, bears tend to have the most energy like in the late morning, early afternoon, maybe 10, 11, like they're up, they're getting ready, they're doing tasks. wolves will have more energy at night. It's like, wow, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm going to clean my house. And then lions, on the other hand, might be like, it's 5 a.m. I'm going to mow the lawn. So just thinking about when you're most productive, because when you are time blocking on your calendar and scheduling tasks during times of day, you can schedule it around the time where you feel you are most productive. So if you are a wolf, for example, maybe you are getting up at 5:45 a.m. and exercising at 6 a.m. If you are if you're a lion, you would be, getting up at 5:45 a.m. and maybe exercising at 6 a.m. If you're a wolf, you might be exercising at midnight because that's when you feel the most energy. Now, I don't think any person is perfectly one. There are moments where you might, be a little bit, and this is nothing that's written in the chronotypes, like you can research this online. But I think for me, I think I'm naturally a bear, but there are moments where I can feel more like a lion on a different day, where I just feel really a lot of energy, or, I just want to wake up at 5:45 or 6. And sometimes the drive, overpowers the circadian rhythm. But, just finding where your rhythm is and where you naturally fall, where you're naturally tired, where you're naturally more awake and have more energy. So those are the different ways that I look at managing time effectively. It is identifying time wasters, knowing if I'm multitasking, if it's a healthy form of multitasking or if it's an unhealthy form of multitasking, prioritizing my tasks, creating a task list and then prioritizing them, and then coming up with a prioritization method of something that works for me, whether it's eating the frog, like doing the hardest task first, the most complex task first, or, having the Eisenhower decision matrix where I divide my task up into different quadrants and identify what is important, what is urgent, what is not important, etc. Time blocking. So figuring out the time of day that I want to accomplish certain things, figuring out the time of day where I want to have fun and scheduling time for fun, figuring out the time of day where I'm going to meal prep and rest. So just putting those time blocks on my calendar so that if anything comes up, I know, okay, I'm available during this time. And something that I didn't mention, I think it's also important to schedule free time to where you don't have anything to do. You can do whatever you want to do, whether that's have fun or rest or whatever. I think it is important to intentionally prioritize rest and to schedule rest. But I think that it is nice to have that free time. So if you do have a friend that calls you and say, hey, do you want to do this thing, or can you help me with this thing, or, do you want to hang out at this time? You can say, hey, well, I'm busy at this time, but I have free time, for these 2 or 3 hours, we can do something then. So you have that dedicated time for the free time. You don't feel like, oh, I have to steal time from, doing something that's important, like doing laundry or, whatever it is it may be, because you've scheduled time for that. And then the other thing and the last thing that we talked about in this video was chronotypes. And with everything said and done, knowing yourself and knowing when you are most productive and when you are most tired and when you are most energetic, and then finding the time, finding that out about yourself and then scheduling your tasks accordingly to meet what your needs are so that you can be successful and accomplish the goals that you have set for yourself and, feel like that you are productive. So if these tips resonated with you in any way, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel to get more videos like this. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.